Okay, so what we are seeing right now is a multi-cluster implementation model of how you do the configuration for Hadoop clusters. Again, the clustering and all these are terminologies which are very common in the industry, which requires or which uh, typically refers to the capacity that you have available for different servers and all. This is where you see the master and the slave process thing itself, as we have talked about that at HDFS level your master node is nothing but the name node, and all the data nodes are slave nodes. The map reduce framework, which is also a part of your Hadoop cluster, that has the master process as job tracker and slave process as individual task trackers, and all of them they have their own distribution in terms of, like, if you look into the Hadoop binary, you will see in the bin directory you can individually start, as well as if you do a start all or stop all, it just by default tries to start all of them and all. So just let's have a look at it at a high level, and then we'll take some questions on it. So this is just a simple thing. It's saying that you have a server, a Linux OS, and in a more dedicated infrastructure you have a dedicated name node available, as well as you have a slave node available as well. That's something that will be there. So given this type of clustered environment, the first thing that we need to do in a multi-clustered environment is to make sure that the SSH goes or keeps running on the system. What it shows here is to configure SSH in a passwordless manner. You can see here when you are configuring it from a scratch, a raw thing, excuse me, and that is something which your master process, the name node, uses to communicate and listen to the other heartbeats which your individual data node sends in. So that something is a medium of communication between these master and slave configurations. Once you have an SSH, that is a secured way by which these particular processes will communicate. So make sure that SSH is running and you are able to access the machines. So this way is where it just puts in that on the master node. This is what you will be configuring. You will have your SSH key and all generated, and then you are copying these when you say that remote node. So whatever the keys and the credentials that have been created on the master node, you just put it on the individual slave box. You do a remote copy, SCP, and you do it to the remote IP address, whatever is the IP, just copy there, so that a copy of your SSH related authorized key is also available. And then you can remotely log in. That's what it says, that log into the remote machine and execute the following commands to authorize the key itself. So that's something which you will have to work more with your Linux admins to make sure that all the machines are able to do an SSH. There are, or there might be, as per the company policy, certain restrictions or other things that your Unix admins and all will have to take care. But that's something which Hadoop requires to do that. After that, again, you can look into some of these URLs to get more information about it. For the master node configuration, so assuming that you have, suppose, two boxes. One, you want to make a dedicated master thing. The other one, you want to make the data nodes or the slave thing. So on the master node, first have the IP address of what exactly the IP address of your name node or master node. These are equivalent things, so I'll be using them interreversibly, so it's the same thing. So on the name node system, get the IP, and you will have to update the master file that you have. If you have seen the Hadoop binary in the conf directory, there is a master file that is available. So make sure that when you are making this cluster, you have all the IP addresses of individual system nodes, and this assumes that you have Hadoop installed, similar version on all the machines, and now you are trying to add them being a part of a cluster and all. But as I mentioned, that in other things like Java running on individual systems, same version is a good thing, as well as SSH. Those are some things which you should have already done. Get the details of the IP address, and as it says that have the actual IP address, not 127.0, because we all know that's a local IP which always points to that particular system. So this is something what it just gives a detailed part. This we have already put in the passwordless login, the SSH thing on this one. Have your Hadoop installed on individual systems. Java is another prerequisite. So that's the basic thing that you are doing. On each of these systems, core site you already have modified. This is a basic part of the installation that we have done. And this is the temporary directory you are creating. Now this, we know that this temporary directory, depending upon what you are running on that system, if you are running the master process, this will be used to keep the master specific configuration and system files. If it's the data node or the slave process which is running in, it will use it for its own storage at that particular level. Same thing applies to your HDFS-site. This is something which we talked about, that for name node as well as for data node, you can specify where the name node should keep its directory, that it says that determine where the local file system and DFS name node should store its block. And for the data node, where the data node will itself store the individual blocks. So when you mention it as a name node thing, which basically your edit file as well as FS image, which will be available there. Replication factor itself. So these are certain things which we talked yesterday that you have to explore for that default.xml, and individually. A lot of these configuration properties are available which you can configure for a file system. That way it will be helpful. And we'll just address some of these questions, but I think let's first go through this one. Many of the questions which will get clear in the subsequent discussions, but as we talked about, have identical installation of Hadoop on all the systems, have these individual configurations up and running for each of the machines, and that's where it is trying to point out. Now depending upon whether it's the master name node or the data node, you will accordingly modify your or specify the property that you have here. Now needless to say, this is something as you will see that once you update your master and slave, the name node will take care, but the basic installation is the same. And in the MapRed thing, again right now it doesn't gives you low level details itself, but MapRed is where you will be configuring parameters specific to your MapReduce framework, job tracker, and your task tracker. That's something once we go into MapReduce we'll see it. But these three basic files, core site-xml, HDFN site, and MapRed, these are the things which you will be touching in. As it says that if you don't want any processing capability, you just want it to store the data, just leave this file, don't need to put in, and you will be just putting that particular detail. Now this is from step 8 onwards, you are doing the actual like the specific changes for a cluster. So choose one machine as a master machine where you will run your name node. Open your masters file. In that, in the conf, you will see the master files that is available, and put the IP address there at the machine's name where the secondary name node will run. So in this masters you will run that particular thing. That's what it shows here, that some of the screenshot itself, that once you have wherever is the node that is coming in on that particular system on the master thing, just simply add the IP address. That should be helpful. Check it directly, you will be able to get that detail. Now when you do that, when you have two machines, you will not do start all, you will just do start-dfs. Start-dfs will kickstart your HDFS related things like your name node, secondary name node, and the data node. Typically your name node and secondary name node runs on the same machine itself, and data node will be the one which will be running on the slave configuration. So there is a slave file also. Now this file will only be updated for all the slave boxes, because on each Hadoop installation you have both the files, the master file as well as the slave file. But you will not as you can see here that you are adding on the master thing. Right now we are on the master node only. So on the master node, in the master file, we have added the IP address of the secondary name node. If we know that we want to run it separately, if we don't add anything, that means that on the same box both your name node as well as secondary name node, both of them will run, and both of them are master processes. There is no slave between them. Name node and secondary name node, both are master processes. The slave is the data node process, and those machines will be picked by whatever you add it in the slave box. So this is where you just have to, the first entry should be your master name node IP, and after that you will just keep on adding data node 1 to the IP addresses that will be there. So that's something which will be available. As you can see that it says that add name node machine only if you are running a data node on the name machine. So slave is whatever you specify in slave is all dedicated for storage. So if you enter your name node also in the slave things, what will happen is that apart from running a master instance like your name node and data node, name node and secondary name node, it will also run one copy of data node on your machine 1. So it's all up to you. Many times you would like to use that because you have a good storage available and you have good RAM. So of course you would like to give the RAM capability or the memory part to the name nodes and all, and the secondary name node. But in order to actually utilize the hard disk that you have for that particular system, you might as well want to keep that also as a data member. Once it's a data member, that capacity get added up to the overall cluster. So this is what you are doing till now in the master node. You added the secondary name node if you want to add or anything or change anything on that particular part, and then you in the slave things you added the IP address of each of the data node wherever you want to put the copy. Adding the name node is not recommended if you have the capacity, but if you want to utilize the storage at the name node level also, you can add it up. Slave node is typically the same thing. Again, go there, find your IP address, whatever it is. All it says is the same thing. Install Hadoop, Java, you must have taken care. These are things which is typical. Exactly same configuration has to happen. You are specifying no changes, nothing is getting changed. And even this is one additional property which you can put in. As we said that many times you might as well want to reserve a certain capacity. You don't want the whole capacity or the hard disk to get full. So you want to reserve on each of those individual data nodes or slaves that out of 10 GB, always reserve 2 GB. Don't let it consume all the capacity or the space that it has. So this is something which decides what should be the maximum level of utilization that particular disk can have. And we talked about a scenario yesterday when we have to make a copy in a multi-cluster mode, and what's the 3 copies getting made on a single cluster, because on all other members it's already filled with the reserve capacity. So all these parameters, once you analyze HDFS site, for each and every parameter level you will be coming to know, but these are some common things. DFS replication we have already seen. This is a static or configuration way to specify that limit. You can always change it through command line as we have practiced early. And these are the way just to specify the directories. Whatever you specify using DFS data dir, this is all the capacity that gets added, which will be utilized to store the files which you will be pushing in there itself. If it says that use comma delimited list of directories, then the data will be stored on all of that. That's something which will be a good thing out. MapRed, again, it has kept it blank, no changes and all on that particular part. And on your slave, that is what it's showing a VM2. If you're trying to put a VM and all, you can always look into the logs file. We will see that there is a specific data node and all for this. So data node and task tracker, these are slave processes in your Hadoop. Task tracker, job tracker, we'll see later when we go into the details of MapReduce framework. So this is all internal, which you are doing in no specific configurations. As you can see that you are just doing simple configuration and no specific changes as of yet. So as long as you make these changes, I think that should be good enough to get the details part. Okay, so this is how you'll be doing a multi-cluster installation, changing your master nodes or configuring your master process or slave processes and getting the individual details out on all these systems.